All right, Job chapter 31, let's call this one, Let Me Be Weighed, because in this chapter, he is going to start out with the relatively famous passage, I have made a covenant with my eyes, how then could I gaze at a virgin? Where he is talking about the way in which he has agreed that as a married man, he is not going to gaze on another woman. And that's going to be important because he is going to go through a series of if-then statements that say, if I'm actually guilty of the things they are accusing me of, then let this happen. But before that, he's going to say, as for my eyes, I made a covenant with them not to gaze on a virgin, but I know that God still sees my condition. And therefore, if I have been dishonest, let me be weighed, thus the title, in a just balance so that my true integrity, a recurring theme, can be revealed. More than that, if I have stolen, let someone else reap the benefits of what I have sown, or simply let them be rooted up so that I cannot reap the benefit of ill-gotten gains. Beyond that, as we mentioned before, in the first verse that alludes to Job making a covenant with his eyes not to stare on a woman who is not his wife, he is likewise going to say, if I have schemed on someone else's wife, let my wife serve another. And to put it bluntly, he's going to say something akin to, and let her be serviced by another. In the same way, I have schemed on the wife of another. Likewise, he is going to say, if I have been unjust to my servants who had an appeal to me for relief or some kind of justice, where does that leave my appeal to God for justice in my time of need? Moreover, he's going to go on to say, if I have mistreated those in need, he's going to make a very blunt curse essentially on himself to say, let my shoulder be dislocated, my arm pulled out of its socket, before he goes on to say, if I have wrongly rejoiced in my wealth or wrongly rejoiced in the misfortune of my enemies, if I have been stingy or inhospitable, let my case come before God so that I can give an account of my ways. And finally, if I've been a bad boss or a bad steward to either the land or the landowners who I oversee, he's going to conclude by saying, let thorns grow instead of wheat and foul weeds instead of barley in this chapter, where as opposed to cursing God, as his wife suggested that he should do before dying earlier on in this account of Job's suffering, he is actually going to respond to the accusations against him by cursing himself if he's guilty of any of the things that he is listing in this chapter in response to the allegations or the accusations against him. Quite possibly giving us an even deeper insight into Job's character in this chapter, where he not only passes on the chance to curse God, but the chance to actually curse those friends who are wrongly adding to his misery. And not just those friends, the people we've seen described in previous chapters as outcasts themselves, who now seem happy to see Job suffering. See, because Job could have asked for a curse on those who had either wrongly accused him or wrongly found joy in his suffering. But instead of seeking a solution that drew more people into his pain, he simply took responsibility for proving his own innocence, even if it meant that he had to suffer more unjustifiably. So in a situation where he could have justifiably drawn others into a share of his suffering for falsely accusing him, his, once again, integrity meant so much to him that he was willing to suffer more to clear his name. Potentially providing us an interesting contrast to what we saw in the last chapter, where we saw an example of the ways in which hurt people can hurt people. In this chapter, we're getting to see the ways in which Job, in the middle of all his pain, is still passing on an opportunity to justifiably have other people share in his misery, helping us to potentially once again see why God recognized Job for his integrity. So as we often say, God's best to you as you go forward in him. God willing, recognizing the way that the most efficient path out of your difficult situation can sometimes involve overlooking even legitimate grievances.